Hi guys, it's me George, and today I wanted to do a book review. And the book review that I'm about to do might actually surprise a couple of people, considering that this is a channel primarily based around traditional witchcraft and folk magic. But hear me out and you'll see the method to my madness in a bit. But my partner had bought me for my birthday a Kindle. I've never ever had a Kindle before. And I'm loving it because I can like read all of the books on one thing. And I'm like, oh, there's so much space. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you can actually beat a real book, but it is probably the best present I've ever got. I fucking love it. I read it all the time. So since I've got it, I've been like balls deep in the Alice Hoffman novels. Because for those of you that don't know, my favorite film is Practical Magic. Has always been Practical Magic since I was a little boy. It's my like fangirl moment, and because of the new one is out next year, don't know how I feel about that, but that's another time for another story. I think they ruined Hocus Pocus 2. Anyway, right, I'm digressing. I wanted to see what the new one might possibly look like, and also just read the books. So I've read 3 of the books, and at the moment I am onto the 4th book, but I needed a bit of a break. I was getting a wee bit Alice Hoffman out, as much as I'm loving them. Reading them back to back, I was like, I need something to break this up. And this is the book review I am going to do, which might surprise some of you. Now, before I begin, first of all, I think that there seems to be a really bad habit, and it's a really old habit, and it's a really bad habit of, if you're a traditional witch, to be like, ugh, Wicca, it's terrible. And if you're a Wiccan, to be like, ugh, traditional witchcraft, it's terrible. And, it's 2025, let's just leave it. Like, let's just build a bridge, because it's boring. There are friends of mine that are Wiccans, initiated Wiccans, that I have learnt so much from, that I have taken within my magic quite a lot of stuff that they've brought to the table, and I actually have quite a lot of respect for Wicca. Sure, it's not my path, but I definitely have a lot of respect for it. And you know what? I think we're cut from the same fabric. I do. I see Wiccans as like cousins or sisters. We're it's just a different stream of witchcraft. I think we all belong in the same ocean, but I think it's just a very different stream of witchcraft. And that might be really controversial to say. But yeah, I don't have any issue with Wicca. So the book that I am going to be reviewing is going to be In Search of the New Forest Coven by a chap called Philip Heselton. Now, I've wanted to read this for a while, and a lot of people will be like, well, why are you kind of reviewing this if it's about Wicca? For those of you that don't know, the New Forest Coven was said to be a coven that had initiated Gerald Gardner into witchcraft and initiated him as a witch before he formed the religion, the branch of witchcraft known as Wicca. And so therefore, the New Forest Coven would be technically a pre-Gardnerian version of witchcraft. So that's why I wanted to read it completely, because it would be interesting to see what maybe they practiced or things that they believed or anything like that. And first, like right off the cuff, like I just want to say, Philip Heselton would make an amazing private investigator because the man leaves no stone unturned. Like everything is out in the open in regards to the individuals. And I think he goes into like so much detail to the point where at the beginning, with all due respect as well, because I think it was a good book, but at the beginning of the book, I was somewhat like really, really overwhelmed because it was like where they were born, where they were raised, the friends they had, maybe like relatives they had, and it went way back to the point where I was like, whoa, like it was a lot. But if you're going to read a book about a coven, it's about a group of individuals, and of course it's going to have their life in it. And actually, it wouldn't be a good book if it didn't have their life in it, in their background and where they come from, because you kind of need to look at the beginnings of things, because that's essentially what it's doing, right? And it was super interesting, and as it got into the middle and the end, it really went into kind of what I was after. which was regarding beliefs, regarding certain influences, things like that. And don't get me wrong, I mean, it wasn't like, here is exactly what they believed word for word, like, here is exactly what they practiced. Like, it wasn't like that at all. It was a glimpse. It was a glimpse into them. But Philip Heselton basically summarizes that he doesn't believe they were a long lost tradition of witchcraft that's been survived from generation to generation, as Gardner had said. But that mainly they were actually a group of individuals. They were a group of individuals that had come up with their own thing, their own practice, and that, they didn't just call themselves witches straight away and overnight. This wasn't a thing that there was like, right, we're a witch coven now. It was a thing that kind of just slowly developed. And around about roughly 1925, there were at least 2 people that were maybe identifying with the term witch, what he speculates. And there is speculation in the book. There is quite a lot of speculation, but it's not speculation with no evidence. There's definitely a lot of evidence involved within the book to kind of back all of that up. And, a lot of them were very, very wealthy. A lot of them were very, very to-do. Not necessarily my kind of people, if I'm honest, but, it's nothing to do with me. Not necessarily my kind of people. Some of them were like involved in fox hunting, and I'm all right, fuck that shit. I fucking hate that. But we're not going to go into my hate of blood sports. But, they weren't really or necessarily my people, but some of these people were like so wealthy as well, like really, really wealthy. But a lot of them were involved in Freemasonry, co-Freemasonry and Rosicrucian movement, and another kind of occult order that had emerged from that. A lot of them were involved within that. So there is definitely the Masonic kind of influences and the higher kind of occult order, the secret society influences within Wicca, which you can definitely see. If you look at an example in terms of like initiations, it being an initiatory lineage. So there's that. But there were also people there, like individuals, and I believe her name was Edith Oldmeadow, I think. Some of the names were like amazing. Some of the names were actually like fabulous. Like Dorothy Clutterbug. It's like brilliant, amazing. But Edith Oldmeadow was a character that really, really intrigued me. And she wrote literature. She was an elocution teacher, but she also wrote literature, and I believe she wrote 23 or 25 books. And a lot of these were stories and things like that. But one of the books she wrote was The Folklore of Herbs, which had a couple of references in it to witchcraft and witches within it. And a lot of her books talk about the god Pan, talk about, are actually quite kind of pagan. In which Ronald Hutton does kind of argue that, there was this kind of resurgence in the late 1800s, early 1900s of kind of this like pagan identity within literature. But the interesting thing was, for that time, she wasn't really religious. She wasn't religious at all. She was an Anglican. She was baptized as a Catholic, but then she fell away from the church and then just didn't ever really mention religion after that. The only time she ever mentioned religion was in her books, was about pagan rituals, and spirits and fairies. And she had a very firm belief in the fae. Even in her book, she talks about people being like fae touched, and she talks about dancing barefoot in the woods and things like that. Like, I read her like bit in the book and I was like, you were definitely a witch. Like, and I'm not normally that person to be like, right, that's it, that means you're a witch, But I was like, okay, I see where we're coming here and I see where we're getting here. So it was really, really interesting. And it was really interesting to see just the influences behind it. And there was a lot of things like the significance of the rose played quite a lot in this SA coven, this group of individuals mainly, because they wasn't really, I think the book actually said that they don't really, he doesn't really think they would call themselves a coven, so to speak. in the way that Gerald Gardner kind of indicates it is, you know. But it was really, really interesting, and I actually really, really enjoyed it, and I do thoroughly recommend it to anybody. Wiccans definitely, and traditional witches alike, because I think it is a glimpse into a pre-Gardnerian system of magic. And that they had quite a firm belief in reincarnation and the idea of reincarnation. A lot of them, you know, there's speculation that some of them would have maybe had seen themselves as witches in a previous life. And that they, because they were witches in a previous life, they could be witches now. So there's a lot of that. I'm trying to think. There's a couple of things. There's some really interesting things in the book. There's influences there of numerology, reincarnation, Freemasonry, like Rosicrucians, spiritualism. There's like yoga as well. There's like a lot of influences. So it's really interesting to see these people. And a lot of them, there's a couple of references of these people calling themselves white witches, which is very oldie worldy. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. And one of the things Philip Heselton kind of speculates is that actually these people, Gerald Gardner was probably the first person they might have even initiated. They might have even not have had an initiation rite. He might have been the first person they actually initiated, possibly. Again, speculation. But it's really, really interesting. I really enjoyed this book and I found it really interesting. This isn't mentioned in the book, by the way, but I have actually, this was years ago and I don't remember who told me. I think it's one of my friends who is Wiccan. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him. But I was told that the New Forest Coven apparently worshipped a kind of Baphomet-like figure. And there was influences there of this like Baphomet kind of figure, but I'm not sure. I don't know. But that wasn't in the book, by the way. It's just as a kind of side note. But yeah, if you are looking for something to read and you want like a really deep dive, I would thoroughly recommend In Search of the New Forest Coven by Philip Heselton. I think it's a really good book, and I think Philip Heselton leaves no stone unturned. And I think that the amount of focus and energy that must have gone into going into the backstories, like that is a lot of dedication, and that would have taken so much time as well. So yeah, I think I'm actually probably the first person to do a book review on this. But I really, really enjoyed it. And I think this time of the year when it's dark, when we're not going outside and we get to hibernate, as I like to call it, not rot. I hate that. I'm going to sit here and rot. Like, ugh, no, we're not rotting. We're hibernating. We're going with nature. Like, rotting is kind of almost a term that you could make someone feel guilty for. I'm not about that. Let's hibernate. Let's do that. Anyway, I digress. Minor ADHD, I do apologise. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you all have a really fabulous Yule, and you have a great welcome into the Gregorian New Year. So, as well, sorry, before I go, there was also influences of the Ancient Druid Order as well, a society known as the Ancient Druid Order. And in 1946, Gardner actually went to a winter solstice ritual along with another person from this New Forest Coven. So yeah, sorry, things coming back to me, but you know what? I've gone this far and I'm going to hold out and I'm going to publish it. So over and out, and peace.